I'm using my cell phone as my Wi-Fi hotspot, and I was in the middle of this huge brick building, and it just was not connecting, and so that's why I'm 5 minutes late. I apologize, everybody. I'm really,
You're
really
here now.
sorry.
We're thrilled.
I think I got
I'm glad
it.
you made it.
So let's hope that neither I'm not plugged in, so let's hope that neither one of my batteries die over the course of my presentation. I'm really, really excited to be here. So thank you, Michelle and Elizabeth and Jennifer and Valerie, Helena, Marcia, and everybody else who is attending this session today. So I don't know if you want me to just get started or if you want to give an introduction, Michelle.
Yeah, you can just jump right in, especially since we've already got a little bit over time, so you have plenty of time, and we can have Q&A at the end. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let me open up my PowerPoint. Yeah, I flew my flight from Newark, left at 6 a.m. And I live about an hour and a half south of the airport. So I got up at 1:30 and left home at 2:30 to get my flight. So I could have as much time here with my friends as possible.
That's early.
Anyway, yeah. So if I'm a little loopy, it's probably because I'm a little bit sleep deprived.
Gotcha.
But I am excited about accreditation and assessment. And I was just telling my friends about it. They said, well, what do you do? And so I said, well, these are the things, the two big things that I do in my role at Stevens. A tiny little bit of background about me. So my doctoral work was in HR, and I worked with macro level databases from the Department of Labor, and I also, that was for my master's thesis, and then for my PhD, I worked on a small training program that I designed. So I did a lot of psychometrics. So I'm always looking at the people side and the data side of things. And then I worked as a professor for about 30 years. In there, I was also a department chair, started getting involved in outcomes assessment, led outcomes assessment campus-wide when I was in Rhode Island, then moved to Staten Island and did business accreditation there. So now I'm at Stevens, and some people might say, oh, I moved over to the dark side. So I'm 100% administrator now. I'm not a professor anymore, but I still kind of think like a professor, and I know what professors need for their data. If I'm going too fast, or if you can't hear me, let me know. Or if there's too much background noise, let me know. Is everything okay, Michelle? Can you give me a thumbs up? Is okay?
Yes.
So,
yes. Thanks.
Thank you. So this presentation is about the work that I do at Stevens for assessment and also for accreditation. So a lot of times when I'm talking to professors, I get them to think about assessment as the carrot, like this can help you. And I don't discuss accreditation with professors because that's the stick. But we know we have to do both and we have to balance both. So that's what I'm going to discuss today. Why is this moving? Okay. So Stevens Institute of Technology, we have about 150 undergraduate and graduate programs. I think the other one, I'm sitting on top of a heater and that one is kind of noisy, but I think this one might be more quiet. Okay. Yeah, that's better. So we have about 150 graduate and undergraduate programs, primarily in STEM. About 2/3 of our students are in STEM. And then we also have a pretty big portion of students in business. And then we also have social sciences. So social sciences and humanities for STEAMs are not just social sciences and humanities, it's the technical side of that. So students who major in music major in music technology, like recording sound and the technical side of sound, also making music, but the technical side of it. So it's a really, really technical school, university. And because it's very technical, we have lots and lots of specialized accreditation. So our regional accreditation is middle states. We also have AACSB, we have ABET, we have ACS, and so forth. And I'll go through each one of these as we go through presentation. And like a good professor, I did make a little table of contents so you can see these are the things we're going to be discussing today. So about Stevens, our accreditation, then our strategy, and so forth. All right, so let's get started looking at Stevens Institute of Technology. Now, Stevens is is a university. So it's called Institute of Technology because it's primarily engineering programs. So you might hear New Jersey Institute of Technology or Worcester Institute of Technology or Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. These are all universities, but they don't use the name university in their name. So Stevens was founded in 1870 for mechanical engineering. One bit of trivia is someone from Stevens invented bubble wrap. So those of you who like bubble wrap, right? And if you really, really like bubble wrap, then when you go on YouTube, just Google or do a search for raccoon bubble wrap, because raccoons like to pop bubble wrap too. All right, so our current programs, we have 72% of our students are in the School of Engineering and Science. So that's the heart of the institution. We also have 26% of our students who are in the School of Business, and that's accredited by AACSB. And then 2% of our students are in humanities, arts, and social sciences. So you can see the number of programs, and that means the number of curriculum maps that we have to manage. For enrollment, to give you an idea of what it looks like on the ground for the school. So we have a little bit more than 8,000 students at the undergraduate and the graduate level spread across the institution. And Stevens is very successful at getting those major student outcomes like first year student retention. We have that at 94%. The 6-year graduation rate is at 87%. So those are very, very high, and we're very proud of those metrics. And part of the reason why we're successful is because we're looking at learning outcomes all the time for all of the programs. All right, a little more detail about Stevens. So you can see the amount of differences or diversity of students. So most universities, I think today in the United States, women outnumber men. But for STEM schools, it's still the opposite. So we have still a pretty big percentage of women in the STEM field. So for undergraduates, 34% of women, for graduate, 30% of women, and the first year retention rate for the fall 2018 cohort is really high for most of our categories of students, as is the 6-year graduation rate. So these are the metrics that we're always focused on, the end point of what do we need to do to be successful and to remain successful and to become more successful at getting students where they need to be for their careers. Okay, now this is a scary table. This one took a little while to put together. These are our different accreditations. Now you could look at all of the accreditation booklets. You could go through the sources in the end and reference lists and read all those booklets and try to wrap your head around what's going on with all of these accreditations. So I decided to put everything into a table to make it a little bit easy to understand. So we have Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Those of you in New England, it's now NCHE. It used to be NEASC. In Southern, they have SACS. On the West Coast, they have other regional accreditors. The regional accreditation is required in order to receive federal financial aid. So if you do not have a regional accreditation, you will not be able to have Pell Grants or student loans, and that's pretty much the death knell for students. So you'll see sometimes there'll be articles in the Chronicle of Higher Ed or in Inside Higher Ed that a school lost its regional accreditation. Sometimes they manage to hang on with a few hundred students, but most of the times not. So you do really want to make sure that you're following the standards and meeting the criteria for your regional accreditor. And each accreditor is different. It's slightly different. So for Middle States, what we're looking at is every 8 years, they do a comprehensive evaluation of the school for reaffirmation. So the big self-study. Now at Stevens, we're starting that process now. And our major self-study will be due in January of 2027. So that's what I'm targeting. So our year is 26-27. They've already told us that they'll do the site visit in the spring of 2027. So we're targeting this January 27 for our report. For middle states, they want 4 years worth of data for the programs, for each one of the majors in each one of the degree levels. So we do gather lots and lots of data so that we can be in compliance with middle states. The minimum frequency for the general education outcomes is annual. And they're looking for direct and indirect scores. So what the students actually learned in the course, and you can't use course grades. We all know no course grades for assessment. This is an individual assignment that a student did to meet a learning outcome, like, did you learn about wave dispersion? And they took a quiz or a test or a lab assignment or something. So direct and indirect for middle states. So we're on the far right now on the chart. So program learning outcomes. For a program, this is a major or degree, could be an undergrad, graduate degree. It could be Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering. It could be Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering or Master of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering. Each one of these programs has to have program learning outcomes. So these are the 3 things, 5 things. You really don't want to go up to 10. I would say 7 might be a manageable number, maximum program learning outcomes. And then those program learning outcomes, do they map to course learning outcomes? So each course will have 3 to 10 course learning outcomes. And again, the more you have, the more difficult it is to manage it and track it. So I would be happy with 5 course learning outcomes. Some courses, though, they have more than that. They really want 10. Some say, no, we only want 3, and that's okay. So that's up to faculty to control the curriculum. So you do want to have a curriculum map of your program learning outcomes mapped to your course learning outcomes. For middle states, you have to have also your general education program learning outcomes. So you have to have a gen ed program. The gen ed program has to have program learning outcomes. And then those program learning outcomes also have to map in a grid to the program learning outcomes for each major. So for mechanical engineering, they'll have the program learning outcomes of solve using STEM, produce solutions, teamwork, communication. Those PLOs for mechanical engineering have to the GED program learning outcomes, which I think is really kind of a cool thing, because you want to say, well, in mechanical engineering, is this contributing to general education or not? So Middle State says we want to see that. We want to see how those things all weave in together. Okay, so next is ABET. And ABET used to be known as the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. They now call themselves only by the acronym, but I put the old name here in the slide so you would know what ABET is for. So the engineering universities will have ABET accreditation for their undergraduate programs in engineering. So mechanical engineering, ocean engineering, civil engineering, and there's probably a few others that I can't think of. Oh, electrical engineering, okay. Computer engineering. So engineering programs, they have to meet those specific program learning outcomes that ABET specifies, which are the 7. Solve using STEM, produce solutions, communication, teamwork, and so forth. So those are specified. There's no wiggle room there. You can add more to it. So we added one more for entrepreneurship, because we want our engineering students to think about how can they create something brand new after they graduate or even while they're still here. And so they're very, very innovative, thinking about how can I be an entrepreneur? How can I contribute to grow the economy or make something new? ABET, their frequency is every 6 years, where they do a reaffirmation, and they require 3 data points per program learning outcome, and the data can be biannual or triannual. And they also want direct and indirect, and the program learning outcomes are specified at the major and the degree level. Next is AACSB, Association of Advanced Collegiate Schools of Business. The way that AACSB does outcomes assessment, they call it assurance of learning, and their process, what they advocate as a process for conducting assessment, is different than what we see in a lot of other places. And so AACSB, they have their reaffirmations for accreditation every 6 years. They want 2 or 3 data points per PLO, and the data could be annual, biannual, triannual. They also want direct and indirect. And some of the program learning outcomes are specified, meaning if you look through the AACSB documentation, they have some statements of things that they would like students to learn, but they don't have specific lists of program learning outcomes. But if you create your program learning outcomes to meet those concepts, then you would be okay. So that's why I sort of said partial, because it don't specifically give a list like ABET does. Next is American Chemical Society, and they come every 6 years also, and they want only 1 data point per PLO. Woo-hoo! That might be good, might be bad. I mean, I'm a data house, so the more the merrier. But they want only 1, and they want only direct data, and it's by the major and the degree. Now, for AACSB, it's only for the degree. So anybody who's getting Bachelor of Science degree in business, whether they're looking at finance or accounting or management or marketing, that's all under the same umbrella for AACSB. But you notice for engineering, civil, mechanical, electrical, they're all completely different. You have to track them separately. So that's what makes AACSB a little bit different. Next is a smaller one. So the last two are pretty small. Project Management Institute, and they come every 5 years, and they want 2 data points per PLO, direct and indirect, and the PLOs are mostly specified. You kind of have to dig through the reports and say, is that a PLO? And then the last one is cybersecurity, right? And so cybersecurity is a really big deal because we're all online right now, right? So I'm using 2 pieces of technology. I'm using my Droid to get on Zoom, and so I'm using Verizon. Here is 4G. You all might know 5G. Cybersecurity is big to get scared about that every day. And so we have cybersecurity programs at Stevens. Well, of course we do, because we're an Institute of Technology. So they want 1 data point, and it says my internet connection is unstable. So if I drop off, let me know. I'll try to do something else. You see the number of students for the programs. One, of course, ABET. We have more than 4,000 students here, and then AACSB. We have to meet all these requirements all the time for assessment. So how do we do that? So we developed a strategy for gathering data. So the frequency for gathering data is we gathered.
I think our signal was obviously right. It was getting weak. Hopefully she'll pop back in a second. Oh, here she comes. We got you back, Shani. Can you hear me? Maybe she's still connecting. Ah, there.
Okay. So our strategy is to meet the middle stage requirements as much as possible. So we gather data every semester. So a course that has a course learning outcome mapped to a program learning outcome, we gather data every semester. So we have annual data, and then report it out annually, give it back to the department chairs annually. And our goal is to have 4 years of clean data. Now, we actually have data going back much further than that, but that must have is 4 years worth of data. And we use this frequency for the ABET programs and for the programs in the School of Engineering that.
Oh, we lost Shani.
Yeah, shoot. I think that signal is just.
She's back. She's back.
Oh, yay. We'll just roll with it.
There's
Thanks
my
for,
audience.
thanks for everyone's patience. Thanks, Susie.
Yes, I'm here.
We see you. We hear
Okay,
you.
let me try share screen again. Um, so we meet the state's requirement by gathering data every semester and every year. For AACSB, however, so the programs in the School of Business, they collect data every other year, so biannually for those majors. And so Middle States has they will accept the AACSB methods of doing assessment. So if you have a specialized assessment that has requirements, that's okay. They will do that instead of doing it the way that we usually do it. Let's proceed. For the data type for all programs, map the course learning outcomes to the program learning outcomes, and then we analyze the data that way. Our indirect data is on student course evaluations at the end of the semester. Students will evaluate a course and say, I like the course.
Like it's a really tough spot where she's at, I think. Here she comes again.
Okay, so I just put the slides back up.
We don't see the slides, just your desktop background again. Okay, there we go. You see your PowerPoint now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna try to get through the slides. Okay, so for the data type, we do want to see the course learning outcomes mapped to the program learning outcomes. And when the students submit their course learning, their course evaluation at the end of the semester, they have to indicate if they think they learned each one of those course learning outcomes. So that's where we obtain the indirect data. So let's say it's a course about ocean, near shore oceans, and there's a question about wave dispersion. So the professor will report, did the students learn wave dispersion? And then the students will also report if they think they learned wave dispersion. So that's pretty cool. So we have indirect and for each one of the course learning outcomes. Okay. Okay, so next slide. So Michelle, can you see where it says 4 PLO program learning outcomes?
We're still on our strategy slide. There you go. Yes. No, 4 PLO. Yeah, got it.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to get into the weeds of the assessment. So for the requirements for the different accrediting bodies, you can see their Middle States, ABET, and AACSB, and the program learning outcomes that each one of those organizations requires or recommends. And so we have to meet those. So for Middle States, that's for the general education across the institution. ABET is for the engineering programs, or the programs that have engineering in their name, the ones that are and we have some programs that are not engineering programs, like computer science, that's not engineering program accredited by ABET. Okay, thank you.
You were at number 8, I think, but unless you're jumping ahead, I don't know. The PLO, right? 4? Or 7? One before? Oh, this one, it looks a little different. It doesn't have the numbers.
All right, I'm on 8. I'm on 8.
Okay.
Slide number 8. Yeah.
Thanks, Yar. Enrique, thank you.
So just to go through this section in as quickly as possible. Each one of the accrediting bodies has requirements of what their program learning outcomes are, as I mentioned earlier. And so I listed those in the slides. The slide that we're looking at now is for cyber defense and cybersecurity. And so you can see for those two accreditations, the requirements, and then how we implement that at Stevens. So our specific program learning outcomes in the cybersecurity Bachelor of Science and also the cybersecurity Master of Science. And you notice that they don't exactly link up, they're not exactly the same. And that's okay for some of the programs. So for middle states, specific program learning outcomes that middle states would want for the gen ed, you really do want to hit those exactly. For some of the specialized accreditations, their program learning outcomes are somewhat required and somewhat suggestions. So you have a little more wiggle room there. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So next we have the American Chemical Society. So we have 4 majors that are under the umbrella of the American Chemical Society. American Chemical Society manages programs in K through 12 and also in higher education. And some of it has to do with things that occur in the labs for lab safety. Some of it is your traditional program learning outcomes. So here we see the requirements for ACS. And then at the bottom, the implementation is what we do at Stevens for our program learning outcomes. I think you have an older version. Once I get to the point of showing the data, then I'll show my own screen. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And this one is the Project Management Institute. So you can earn a degree in managing a project. And so we have several majors that are under the umbrella of the Project Management Institute, and these are their program learning outcomes, some technical expertise, professional behavior, strategic awareness, and so forth. And then implementation, which is within the School of Business. These are the program learning outcomes that we see across the programs in the School of Business. So most of the programs in the School of Business have the same program learning outcomes, similarly to the way ABET has their 7 program learning outcomes of solve using STEM, produce solutions, and so forth. In the School of Business, they have communication written, communication oral, teams, task, and interpersonal, knowledge of methods and executing, and then leading projects, ethics, and global considerations. So we try to line up the PLO that we have with our programs with the PLOs that are required by the accrediting bodies. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we could talk about the frequency of how we actually gather the data. So as I said, for middle states, they want to see annual data. So for the general education program, these are our program learning outcomes, and these are the years when we gather data. So we gather all of the data every year for the general education program. So year 1, 2, 3, and 4, because they want 4 years worth of data. We actually have, for some programs, 14 years worth of data, but for the general education program, which is, we just revised the gen ed program. So we're starting at year 1 this year. Okay, next slide. Okay, ABET. So the ABET requirement, you see that table is a lot more empty. So you have a lot more wiggle room with ABET. So you can gather data every other year for ABET for the program learning outcomes. But since we're gathering data all the time anyway, we just gather data every year. And I think the department chairs and the professors actually appreciate seeing the data once we give them the tables and the charts with the data. That's not to say that they appreciate having to give me the data every semester. So you know how it is. People have a lot of work to do, and not everybody wants to submit data all the time. But once they receive the results of submitting that data, then they're very, very happy. So that's the way that we implement the ABET in terms of frequency. Okay, next slide. Okay, for AACSB, it's every other year, and I did put their semesters in for AACSB because sometimes they'll gather something in the fall and sometimes in the spring, and they're really, really specific and meticulous in our School of Business about how they're gathering the data. And this course in this semester, and this course in this semester, and this professor will submit data, that professor will submit data. So they have specific tables of how they have their schedule set up. And so the implementation is what you see there on the bottom: fall 2021, spring 22, fall 22, spring 23, and so forth. So they have a lot more wiggle room there. And as I mentioned, Middle States accepts the AACSB implementation. So that way the School of Business doesn't have to do more than they otherwise would do. And School of Business, they're happy with the way that they're doing their assessment. Okay, next slide. Okay, so curriculum maps, right? We all love curriculum maps. And this is just a general curriculum map of a course. So we have 6 courses here and then 7 program learning outcomes. And we've all seen these. In general, what I like to see is each program learning outcome maps to at least one required course. Most of them should map to 2 or 3 required courses, but sometimes programs don't have specific required courses. They'll say, well, take 3 of these 5 courses or 6 of these 5 courses. And in that case, you have to be a little more flexible. In addition, each required course should map to at least one program learning outcome. Many times a required course maps to 2 or 3 program learning outcomes. I don't think I would be happy to see a required course map to every program learning outcome, because then that course is trying to do everything and it's not really specializing. But that's up to the professor. So if the professor says, no, my course hits all of them, then by all means, gather that data. Next slide. All right, now this one is tiny, and I know you're not supposed to put 6-point font on a PowerPoint slide, but I did want to demonstrate the extent of the mapping that we do. So for every course and every course learning outcome, if the course is included in the curriculum map, let's say required courses, then we look at each one of those course learning outcomes, which is in the 3rd column from the left where it says description. And we want to map that course learning outcome to the program learning outcome. So for Bio 484, molecular genetics, the course learning outcome, I know the components of the eukaryotic DNA replication apparatus. That maps to solve using STEM. So at the end of the semester, the professor is going to tell me how well the students did on that course learning outcome. And the students are also going to tell me how well they think they use. Do we use a platform? Yes, we use Helio Campus. Yeah, we use Helio Campus to gather the data. And then our in IRE department, one of our senior IRE staff members downloads the student scores and the faculty scores and merges them together into one database for me and puts that in Power BI. So that's where I get the data to give to the professor. So we use Helio Campus. So that's the curriculum map. So for right now I have about 80 curriculum maps that I'm running. So it's 60, not including the School of Business. So School of Business is a little bit different. So lots and lots of really specific maps like these. The department chairs and the professors look at these maps and they'll say, I don't like that course learning outcome anymore. I want to change that. And I'm like, tell me what you want it to be. And then we map them. So by having this level of detail of data, we're able to meet the regional accreditation requirements and also the specialized accreditation requirements. So that's the really wonderful thing about Stevens, because you have these engineers and they're thinking about data and how can I gather data? What can I do with the data? What kind of data do I need? How often do I have to gather the data? And then we have these curriculum maps and then we gather this data. So let's look at the next slide. Thank you, Derek. So this is one of the tables. Now, this data that you're looking at in this table is real data for one of our majors, but I changed the name of the courses and the programs to protect that program's privacy. So I made up a major called alphabets. So we have ABC 101, 202, and 401, 3 courses. One of the courses is taught in fall and spring. And we mapped all those course learning outcomes to those program learning outcomes. And then we take the average score across all those course learning outcomes and roll it up to direct faculty. So all of the faculty who taught ABC 101 and all the course learning outcomes, the average score was 5 out of 5 on solve using STEM for Introduction to Alphabets. For Produce Solutions, they also have 5 out of 5. Now look in the blue, that's what the students said. So the student said, I'm at a 4.8 out of 5, or I'm at 4.9 out of 5. Now, one of the things that I find really delightful about Stevens is now I was a professor for about 30 years, and you know how it is. You teach a class, you get to the end of the semester, and the students say, I didn't learn anything. And you say to the students, yes, you did, because I saw the work that you did, so I know you learned, right? But at Stevens, it's the opposite. You get to the end of the semester, and the students say, so much. And the professors say, no, you didn't. And that's because they're engineers, right? And so the levels are a little bit different. And so it's really I just think it's kind of cute that you have these differences of student self-confidence and faculty belief about how well the students learn. So Enrique, I made a lot of other tables and charts. So I want to share my screen instead of yours so I can show the most recent. So hopefully I won't get kicked off again.
Go ahead and do that.
Okay. So I'm sharing, and I don't know if you can see my screen yet, if you can see my slides.
Yes.
Okay. So it should say 7 quantitative data by course at the top.
Yes.
Okay. So what I do as the assessment coordinator is I think about what do the professors and the department chairs need to see so that they can make adjustments to their curriculum. And so I take the time to make these charts for them. I put all that data in Excel and I make these little charts and then I send it out to them. So what you're seeing here is 4 of the program learning outcomes. The solid boxes are what the professor said, and the striped boxes are what the students said. So for ABC 101, Introduction to Alphabets, for that course, they measured solve using STEM in the fall and spring, and the professors gave the students higher scores than the students gave themselves. For Produce Solutions, for some of the learning outcomes, the students scored themselves higher. So if you see that striped box is higher than the solid box that's directly to its left, then that means that the students scored themselves a little bit higher. So if you look at the seminar in alphabet creation, for solve using STEM, the students scored themselves pretty high. The professors scored the students a little bit low. So then the professors can say, I see that the students are really self-confident in this skill, but I don't think that they really learned that much. So let's try to figure out why there's that discrepancy between what I think about the students learning and what the students think about the student learning. And that gets you to have all kinds of wonderful analysis of the data. And so you're thinking not just what are you teaching the students, but how are you teaching them and how are you connecting with the students on a human level. So when you're in the classroom, when you're looking the student in the eye and they're saying, I got it, or I don't have it, or I don't understand, that's where those differences are coming in to play of the student's self-confidence or the student's self-efficacy and what the professor said. And I just think that's wonderful. I hadn't seen data like this anyplace else before. And so I was really, really excited to get my hands on this data. So that's the quantitative data by course. And so you can also, now I went to another slide, you can map the data on a chart by instead of by program learning outcome, you can map it differently. And that's just, if you're in Excel, you click switch row and column data. So here we're looking at for fall 23, for this course, intro alphabets, it's all of the program learning outcomes for that course. And so that professor can sit down and say, okay, the students did well here, they didn't do well here, they did well here, they didn't do well here. And so each one of the professors can look at their data in graphic form and then think about what they might want to do differently next semester. So you can show the data any way that you want. Next, we can look at the data by program learning outcome and then by course. So here, each course is a different color. So you should be seeing black, pink, and blue bars, Enrique.
Yes.
It says, okay. So this one, solve using STEM, is you're looking at that learning outcome and then the different colors are different courses. So you can say, well, this course did better than this other course in the learning outcome. Next, I will also, number 8 here, quantitative data. I summarize the data by the program learning outcomes. Some of the chairs said this isn't really useful to look at the overall score by program. This might be useful for some of the accreditation to say across the program, this was solved using STEM 4.47 versus what the student said. So I give them these charts, and then if they want to use them, they can. If they don't, then they don't have to. Okay, I'm going to go over this big table, which is the longitudinal data, because we're running out of time. And I wanted to show you this last chart, which says 9 quantitative data longitudinal, Enrique, and it has a lot of different lines on it. Can you see that one?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And anybody who wants the slide deck, just let me know, and I can send it to you. This one is going back to 2014, and this is why it's really wonderful to have so much data, because we can do these longitudinal analyses. So for this program, and this is real data. I'm just not going to tell you what the major was, but this is a real data from a program at Stevens. You can see the dotted lines are what students said about their learning over a 10-year period. And you notice that their self-confidence is increasing. All those dotted lines are on the way up, whereas the solid lines are for each one of the program learning outcomes. And those are pretty much the same, except that one black one, solving STEM, the student scores are going down there. So you might want to pay attention to that one. But I thought this was fascinating to see that student self-confidence is really increasing. And that really lets you tell a story about your program when you're writing your accreditation report. Because the accreditation report, they don't want to just see the data. They want to know what you think about the data. And when you plot the data in this way, then you can start thinking about the data and say, this is what the data means, and this is what we should do differently in the future. So that was my last slide. I am very sorry. I apologize profusely for the dropping off the Wi-Fi again and again and again. And I was really looking forward to just going through this presentation, but I guess we do the best that we can.
No worries,
So,
Dr. Carter.
yeah.
No worries, no worries. Thank you for that. One of the questions that what software are you using or platform to apply and compile and actually maintain this data?
Yes, we are using Helio Campus. It used to be called APHIS. So Helio Campus, we use that for the student learning outcomes, the program, the curriculum maps, all of that. So I'm in there all the time. The professors are submitting their data now. And so I keep telling them I need your data. So we use Helio Campus for everything except the School of Business. The School of Business, they do it differently, except I do obtain their student scores in Helio Campus, but they
And,
get their direct scores differently.
and does it work with other systems like Canvas or Blackboard or anything like that?
Yes, Yes, they have been trying to get us to link our LMS to Helio Campus so that the data can be fed in automatically. But I said, well, some professors don't want to do that. And because I was a professor for 30 years, I'm not going to force professors to do something they don't want to do in their courses. But yes, they do have that functionality. So if you use LMS for everything, then your life will be so much easier. Next. I haven't been watching the chat. Let me put my email in the chat. Oops, it's too fast. Okay. So I'm going to be out. I'm out of the office today, and I'm out of the office on Monday. But if you email me, I'll respond on Tuesday. Any other questions? Oh, we're at time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone, for being the patience. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.